Solving Multiple Step Problems with Tape Diagrams by Dietrich Bowens. Teachers, this is a video on using tape diagrams to add and subtract in multiple steps to solve a story problem. How many of you ever used or taught with tape diagrams? Well, here's an example down below. As you can see, a tape diagram is using the shape of rectangles to show parts and a whole. Notice that the tape diagram is labeled with boys and girls. The visual of this shows you that you are trying to solve to find out the number for both the boys and girls. That means you're trying to find the whole while you see the parts that were given. Tape diagrams are tools students use to solve story problems that require addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. Now in this lesson, in this PD, it'll be addition and subtraction. Now they are in the shape of rectangles as you've seen, and you can teach your students to draw these parts and the whole using rectangles as it represents what the problem says. The purpose is to see what parts and wholes are needed to solve the problem. You must make sure you understand that in a tape diagram, a part is usually the things you see inside the rectangle. The whole can be labeled and shown on the outside. In Eureka Math, we think or reason with RDW. Read, draw, and write. So as you can see, the steps I have here for RDW. Number 1, read the problem for understanding so that you know exactly what you are solving for. Number 2, draw and label. Here's where you'd use their tools such as a tape diagram to show what the problem looks like. Number 3, write an equation or math sentence describing the math work you would need to solve the problem. And number 4, write a word sentence or a statement that would conclude what the problem was asking for. So teachers, this is something that I would have posted in my classroom, maybe have a flyer taped to the students' desk so they can use this as their plan for reasoning out any story problem in Eureka Math. Here's a story problem we're going to work on today, teachers. In 1 year, a factory used 11,650 meters of cotton, 4,950 fewer meters of silk than cotton, and 3,500 fewer meters of wool than silk. How many meters were used in all 3 fabrics? Teacher task. Use your highlighter to indicate the numbers needed and use your pencil to underline and circle the terms that are needed to add and subtract. Discuss with a partner why you highlighted the numbers and underlined or circled the terms you chose. Did you highlight, underline, or circle the same things? Discuss. Now, of course, this task is something you would definitely do with your students in the first step of the RDW. You need to have the students get used to using the tools of highlighters, pencils, and even marking pencils in order to be able to identify details that will help them to see the problem. Now, in your discussion, teachers, this will help you to use discourse with one another in case someone you talk to in your group or with your partner, if your partner may have highlighted, underlined, or circled something different. Students should be allowed this same courtesy. Student discourse is very important to get their thoughts out. Now, the second step is to draw and label. In this case, we want to draw and label with a tape diagram, using manipulatives where needed. In this case, we would use place value chips. These place value chips here that I have indicate place value of thousands, hundreds, tens. Now this first set that I've just pointed out is the number of meters used at that factory for cotton, which was 11,650 meters. Now, the second item or fabric was about silk, and it said 4,950 fewer meters than um, fewer. So that means if it was fewer, we need to make sure that we use the word fewer to actually do an operation to find out how many meters of silk the company or the factory actually did make. Well, fewer usually means lessen. Well, what operation deals with lessen? Subtraction. So if I were to do that, I would take away, of course, the 4,950 from the pile, and that would end up with 6,700, which you see here. Now that number would indicate the number you would put in your tape diagram. Well, let's take a look at that tape diagram. Teachers, here is a picture of a rectangle, total meters. Notice I divided the tape diagram into 3 parts because we're talking about 3 different fabrics. And I labeled with C, S, W. I put the numbers, the letters on the inside, especially for S for silk and W for wool, just to show what each part was, since there was no number for them. But cotton we knew, 11,650. So now we know silk is 6,700. We would put that number right here in this square, in this rectangle. And for wool, we would take that 6,700. It says takes 3,500 fewer meters of wool. So that means we would actually subtract 3,500 from this 6,700. So I'll do that now. So there we are. For the wool, you have 3,200 meters that the factory made. And that number would be put in this tape diagram. Now with all 3 numbers here, and I'm going to write those 3 numbers now. You notice that now the tape diagram has everything in place for you. We had to do some subtraction first, so that's of course one of the operations, but it says how many meters were used in all 3 fabrics. Now if you want all 3 together, then that means you're going to have to do what? You're going to have to add, of course. So if that's the case, we're going to go ahead and show the math here. Here I've shown the math of the subtraction that we just did, but now the addition, you see we have to add all 3 of these values to get to 21,550 meters. Okay. Now, in the RWD, the RDW, there in the concluding part is to write the math sentence. There were 21,550 meters of fabric used. So as you can see, the RDW reasons out every part that is needed so that you are able to see a picture of the visual and show the math work and conclude it. Now, teachers, I made it a point to have a takeaway for you. This is an RDW sheet that I've made in order for you to be able to use in your SGI, your small group instructional groups and your centers. Please use it to your best of your of whatever is best in your use of your classroom. And thank you very much for participating in this PD.